Hello my friend, it's Elliot here, back for another video talking about Blu-rays. And in this video I'm going to be focusing on Arrow Video. That is because at the moment, at time of recording this, there is the Camp Arrow Video summer sale going on. And there are some great prices to be had from Arrow Video's web shop and from other retailers like HMV and Zavvi. This video is just going to be a few recommendations from myself of some titles from Arrow Video specifically, so I'm not going to be talking about Arrow Academy in this video. I want to present some films that, you might want to consider that may not be on your radar already during this sale. If this video doesn't satisfy you and you want even more Arrow Video recommendations, I have a few other videos on this very channel talking about Arrow Video sale recommendations. And I should point out that if you're watching this video after the fact, these recommendations still stand, even if there's no sale going on at all. So you can find recommendations in this video, and I'm going to include links in the description to other Arrow Video videos that I have made. I will point out that all of the releases I'm about to talk about, bar one, are Region B only, so you will need a Region B capable player to play these Blu-rays on. Let's begin with a filmmaker that I think we're probably all familiar with. I have two films from Terry Gilliam that I want to present to you. Two very different films, and one of these is a lot more popular than the other. I'm going to begin with the popular one though. It is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Now, this is the Arrow edition that was released last year. This is the special edition, so this one is sadly not available anymore, but they have released a standard version of this. The only difference is you don't get the booklet poster and the hard card case, but the disc itself and the special features are exactly the same. And you can pick this up for £10. Now, Fear and Loathing is an iconic film. I mean, this film has its film poster on so many teenagers' bedroom walls. Like, it's crazy how iconic that poster with Johnny Depp's skewed head is. Like, it's everywhere. The film itself, though, is a lot more than just a druggy film. It's based on the writings of Hunter S. Thompson, autobiographical in many senses, and it just goes all over the place. But it's a film that I don't think could have been directed by anyone but Terry Gilliam. I know initially Alex Cox was in the running to direct it, but then Terry Gilliam took over. And I couldn't imagine anyone doing this film bar him. Terry Gilliam has such an acute sense of wonder and style, and his films just have their own sense of mythology, and it's almost, this film is a bit like, I don't know, a James Joyce novel brought to screen. Like, it's just an odyssey through this trip to Las Vegas. If you've not seen this, it's a great film, and I only saw this film actually very recently, I'll admit. This had been on my guilty watch list for ages. Anyway, the Arrow Video edition is great. It's the best the film has ever looked. So if you're on the fence about this and you want to explore more Terry Gilliam, for £10 in this sale, it's a great pickup. So that's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The other Terry Gilliam film that I want to highlight is Tideland. Now, Tideland is not as hot of a film as Fear and Loathing. This is, for many people, their least favourite Gilliam film, and it may actually be my least favourite Gilliam film. The reason I want to highlight it, though, is even though I think it's maybe his worst film, it's his most Gilliam-esque film. So if you wanted to encapsulate Terry Gilliam's style, his sense of story and filmmaking, it's all in here. It's a bit of a weird one because on the surface it feels like it should be a children's film, because the central protagonist is a 9-year-old girl and it's totally told through her lens, from her perspective. But the trouble is that what she's seeing in her parents' habits and in the life around her, it's dealing with adult themes and substance abuse. So I think for that reason, it did terribly at the box office because they couldn't bill it as a kids film, and I think most adults just weren't interested in this story. It's a curio, so I would say approach it with caution, but if you're a fan of Gilliam, this is a great chance to pick this up. And it's only £7.50 in the Arrow sale, and I think most of these standard edition releases are £7.50, so it's a great time to pick them up. The next two films that I want to present are about the impending apocalypse, the end of the world, which might be too on the nose for people. They might not want to watch films about the end of the world right now, but I'm going to recommend them anyways. They're both very different in terms of how these stories are told, but thematically they do tread some similar ground. I'm going to go with the one that's more serious first. That one is The Andromeda Strain. So this is a classic film directed by Robert Wise from the 60s. The story is about a fallen satellite from space that is found in this small village in America, and all of the inhabitants just die pretty much instantly. And it's found that there was a virus on this satellite from outer space, and it's up to these scientists to contain it and to discover more about the virus and how they can combat it and contain it. But of course, things end up going awfully awry. What I like about the Andromeda Strain is that it's very sciencey. So this is science fiction with emphasis on the science. The story in itself is kind of plodding and slow. You could almost say there is not much thrilling happening until the very end when there's a race against the clock. But I still think this is a great film. And even though I said it's very sciencey, a lot of the science is kind of bogus science. But the way the film is directed and written, it feels like real science. It's based on a story from Michael Crichton, who is of course a great science fiction storyteller who came up with Jurassic Park and was behind Westworld. So a great story is in here, and I think Robert Wise is an underrated director. Robert Wise, if you don't know who he is, he directed The Sound of Music and West Side Story, so two musicals. He directed The Andromeda Strain, which is an extremely sciencey science fiction film. And then he directed The Haunting, which is, I think, one of the great gothic haunted house films ever. So a bit of a varied career. But I think this is a great film, and the special features on the Arrow disc are great as well. There's a commentary on here, there's a feature from Kim Newman giving a new appreciation of the film, and it is interesting watching this film in the lens of living in the time of coronavirus. So yeah, proceed with caution if you think this might be too much to watch now. But if you're a fan of science fiction, and if you're a fan of other Michael Crichton stories, I totally recommend this. If you're enjoying this video, please do consider subscribing to the channel because it would be great to have you here in this community. I make a lot of videos about Blu-ray collecting and Arrow Video and the Criterion collection, so it would be great to have you here. Anyway, back to the Arrow Video sale recommendations. The other apocalyptic story, Miracle Mile from Steve DeJarnett. This is such a curio, such a strange, peculiar film, almost one of its kind. The story of Miracle Mile begins with this young man who is meant to be on a date with this woman that he fancies, and he misses the date and completely blows it. And he then tries to call her on the phone booth outside of the diner, and on the other end of the phone he ends up speaking to someone who tells him that a nuclear bomb is going to go off in 70 minutes and the whole world is going to be screwed. From there, chaos ensues because word gets out, and then it's all about escaping LA. What I like about this is tonally it's a bit of a mixed bag because there's the real peril and danger of the impending apocalypse, but then there's touches of comedy, and there's love and romance and action. And I love the story of the making of this film and how Steve DeJarnett fought to get this film made, and the passion behind the filmmaking shows on screen. And it's just a great film, a really great film, a great cult film as well, one that fits very well within the Arrow Video collection. There's some great special features as well about the making of the film and an interview with Steve DeJarnett. So I thoroughly recommend this for £7.50. You can't go wrong with Miracle Mile. I want to also recommend Day of the Jackal, and you can't go wrong with this one. This is spy espionage thriller from the 1970s, and it's just so bloated with plot, and you've got to try and wrap your head around what's going on, but it is so well done. It's directed by Fred Zinnemann, who is a tremendous director, making such films as High Noon and From Here to Eternity. So the craft behind this film is incredible, and the political thrills of this and the suspense and espionage, it's a no-brainer. So if you've not seen Day of the Jackal, totally recommend this disc, and the special features on this are incredible as well. So I think Day of the Jackal is a must. Next up, The Possessed. And this film I want to highlight as probably one of the best blind buys I've had from Arrow Video. This film is so good, and I want you to give it a chance if you think it sounds like your kind of thing. The film is an Italian film from the 60s. It's the story of this novelist who goes to this holiday retreat where he's been before in search of this girl that he loves. And he's told that when he gets there, she's disappeared. But things don't add up, and he thinks there's some shady stuff going on. But the way this film is told, it's billed almost giallo-esque. Like, it predates a lot of the big giallo films. It's sort of post-Mario Bava, so it follows a lot of the early Mario Bava, A Girl Who Knew Too Much kind of films. But it predates the films of Fulci and Argento. But the style is there. The giallo style is there. The black and white photography is amazing, and it is dreamlike in parts, like so dreamy. I'd relate it to Carnival of Souls, which is a great dreamy film, and I'd even liken it to the works of David Lynch, like Eraserhead. And David Lynch was hugely inspired by Carnival of Souls, so I wonder if this was on Lynch's radar at all. I don't know, I'm going off on a tangent there. The features on this are tremendous as well. There's a commentary, there's a new appreciation on here. I've got a booklet inside this, but I don't know if the booklet will still be available. And there's an interesting feature about the makeup artist on the film as well. All around a great package. Like I said, one of my favourite blind buys from Arrow Video. So for £7.50, it's great. We're going to move over to Japan now. And one Japanese film from Arrow Video that I want to highlight is Street Mobster from Kinji Fukasaku. I came to this film recently. I'd only watched this within the last week, following a marathon of films from Takeshi Kitano. So I really got into the whole Yakuza aspect of Kitano's works. And I know that he was fond of Kinji Fukasaku. And of course, Kinji Fukasaku was an expert in Yakuza films. He did some of the Battles Without Honor and Humanity films, Street Mobster. There's a few others from Arrow as well, like Doberman Cop and Cops vs. Thugs. So, Street Mobster is a great entry in his filmography. The story follows this criminal who is released from prison after 5 years. He bumps into this prostitute who he sort of recognises. It turns out that he raped her in the past, and this starts this whole very strange, very dynamic relationship between these two characters. And then he's caught in the middle of these rival Yakuza gangs, and he doesn't really want to side with either one of them. He's a very independent spirit to his detriment, and it's just like watching a car on fire. You know that this is not going to end well, but you just can't look away. And it's a great example of Yakuza filmmaking. So I implore anyone, if you're interested in Japanese crime films, Street Mobster is a great one. We're going to jump from Japan over to New Zealand now, because I want to highlight two films from the New Zealand filmmaker Vincent Ward. The first one I'm going to highlight is Vigil. Now, Vigil, I feel, is actually kind of a strange fit for Arrow Video. This feels like it would probably be a better fit for Arrow Academy, because it's a film that was entered as the first entry in the Cannes Film Festival competition from New Zealand ever when it came out. It's a coming-of-age story set in rural New Zealand about this young girl who lives with her mother and, in the absence of her father, has to help life go along. And then this new stranger comes into the mother's life, and they have a relationship, and it's all about this girl struggling with coming to terms with this new man being in her life. The film is told rather poetically, and the visuals are stunning. Like, the cinematography is incredible. It's a film that I'd probably liken to something like Ken Loach's Kes, or maybe El Sur from Victor Erice. It's just a great coming-of-age film and a beautiful story, a beautiful film all round. And Vincent Ward is a filmmaker who I think deserves a lot more attention. Vincent Ward is probably most famous for the film What Dreams May Come, starring Robin Williams. That's the film about Robin Williams going from heaven into hell, and he goes through paintings and things like that. You'll probably know the film. But Vincent Ward, incredible filmmaker. Vigil, this is an incredible disc, a very critically acclaimed film coming from Cannes Film Festival. Yeah, it's just so good. The other New Zealand Vincent Ward film I want to highlight is The Navigator, a Medieval Odyssey, which is a film quite different to Vigil. This one is more fantasy, more playful, but then also it still has the very spiritual, poetic tone of Vigil. I love the story on this film. It's about this town of people in medieval England who decide that they need to protect their town from the plague. Now, there is this boy in the town who has visions of the future, and they look to him for guidance. And he says that they need to tunnel down into the earth to find salvation. So what they do is they tunnel down through the earth and they come out in modern day New Zealand. When they get to New Zealand, they need to place this religious icon on the top of a cathedral for their village to be saved from the plague. It's a wonderful story, and the reason I love this is it has shades of so many other films I love. Like, I think there's sometimes shades of Tarkovsky in this, which is maybe kind of a strange fit, but the film begins in black and white in the medieval period, and then when they get to New Zealand, it goes colour in modern day. There's also, strangely, shades of The Lord of the Rings, and I'm not just saying that because of the New Zealand connection. There's this wide shot of the tunnel through Earth, and you can see them falling through, and it looks just like in The Lord of the Rings when Gandalf is falling with the Balrog. It's a great film and playful, but also has a lot under the surface. And the disc from Arrow is great. And it's a great double bill with Vigil. If you want to get into New Zealand cinema, there's no better place to start than getting Vigil and The Navigator. Next up, I'm highlighting a collection of films from a very underrated filmmaker who, for the longest time, his films were not able to be seen, like, at all. Most of his films weren't available on DVD. You had to watch like sketchy VHS copies to actually view these films. I'm talking about the films of Jose Larraz, sometimes known as J.R. Larath or Joseph Larraz. He went through so many different names in the credits of his films. This is the box set that Arrow released, and it contains 3 films. It contains Vampires, Whirlpool, and Coming of Sin. It's a tremendous box set, and to be honest, a bit of a revelation. It's not going to be for everyone, because if you're not familiar with Larraz, his films are quite peculiar. He's a filmmaker that's likened to maybe Jess Franco, who did Vampiros Lesbos, or Jean Rollin, or maybe Norman J. Warren. So these are a very particular type of cult film focusing on sex and violence, but in a very dreamlike and experimental way. What's interesting about Larraz is he's a Spanish filmmaker, but all of these films were made in England, and he had a particular obsession with England, and he saw it through a particular lens as well. It's quite weird watching these films, seeing the English countryside, seeing these English manors and houses and graveyards, but through this European lens. So while not for everyone, it's a great set of films, and although this box set is not available, Arrow have re-released the 3 titles in a non-special edition set. So you still get the 3 films, I just don't think you get the booklet, and the case has different artwork on it. But it's pretty much the same release and a great way to get into his films. If you'd still kind of be on the fence about Larraz, you don't want to invest £25, I think this costs in the sale, then there is a good option to start off. This is a non-Arrow Blu-ray, so do forgive me for showing a non-Arrow one. This is his film Symptoms, and this was released by the BFI here in the UK. And Symptoms is, I think, Larraz's best film, and it captures all of his themes, and it's much like his other films, but I think it is his magnum opus. And you can pick this Blu-ray up for less than £10. So if you want to get into Larraz, but you don't want to invest £25 for the full box set, which I think is worth it, this is a much safer bet. And I think Symptoms is so good. One of the best British horror films of all time, I think. So that's Larraz, and hopefully you can consider his films. I've got one more film to show you, and I think this one's a no-brainer. So let's end on this. It's Horror Express, starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. So even though it stars the 2 biggest film stars of the Hammer horror films, it isn't Hammer horror, but it sort of feels like Hammer horror mixed with this European style, because it's directed by a Spanish director, Eugenio Martin, who's credited as Jean Martin, I think to appear English. The film's plot is kind of standard. It's about this fossilized monster who is taken on this train to be transported back to England, and the monster comes to life and starts killing people on the train. You've got Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing actually probably in their most subdued performances. They're really not larger than life in this, and that's really interesting to watch. And they're both on the same side. They're both good guys, which is something you don't see at all in other films, really. And then in the third act, you've got Telly Savalas coming in and just totally hamming it up and ad-libbing and just giving a crazy performance. It's a wild mishmash of a film, but I think it works, and it's magical and horrific in parts. There's some really great gore in this film. And look, there's nothing more cinematic than a train. Horror Express, an absolute doozy. Pick it up in the Arrow sale for £7.50. There you have it, a selection of Arrow Video titles to consider during your sale buying. And like I said at the top of this video, if you want more recommendations, by all means go and check out my other videos on Arrow Video. I've done videos in a few sales in the past, so there should be plenty to dig into. But if you're still not satisfied after all of that, by all means get involved in the comments and ask me for more recommendations, I guess. If you want to stick around on the channel, by all means click whatever video is floating on my face right now. I'll be back with more videos very soon about Blu-rays and Arrow Video. So until then, keep safe and keep watching great films.